Now let's say you're working with some pitch samples. Now when I mean pitch samples, I mean samples that have got a specific key per sample. So for example, over here in this samples folder, I've captured some pianos. As you can see with the naming convention, I've got piano underscore and then the name or the pitch of that sample. So I want to take all these samples. I've currently got 37 samples here running from C1 all the way to C4, and I want to add these to an instrument. Now, the best way to add these to an instrument is probably using the Groove agent. So I'm just going to close this for now. I'm going to click Add Instrument. I'm going to go for Groove agent. Now, why it's good to use this is because you've got multiple pads that you can assign a sample to. So even though you might think the Groove agent is suited for sort of percussive, triggered sounds, you can actually use this for pitch sounds as well. So I'm going to go back to this folder. I'm going to select all my samples. I'm just going to drag this over here to the corner, open up Groove Agents again. And as you can see, this is C1. So if I drag this, I'm actually dragging it onto C1. I'm making sure that I'm dragging to the bottom of there. And it's going to populate all my pads with the respective samples. So as you can see, this is C1, C1 here, C sharp 1 over here. And as I jump to here, I can go to the different group sections of pads. So over here, it's got C1 all the way up to D sharp 2. Over here, it's got E2 all the way up to G3. And then here are the remainder of the samples going up to C4. So if I play back my instrument now, you can hear that I've got my pianos over there. Now what's quite nice about this is that I can add the samples into here, trigger them with my MIDI keyboard controller, and then further process the instrument using some effects and inserts over here. So for example, let's say I want to add a ping pong delay. I'm going to set this to 8th notes. So I'll just close this instrument down, open this up, go to 8th notes, just change this filter a bit, add a bit more feedback, make it more spatial, pull back the mix. Then I want to add a reverb. So even though the samples have got some reverb embedded in them, I want to add even more reverb to this instrument. And then finally, let's add in some slight bit of chorus. So I'll just open up that chorus. I want to have maybe a slower time. So I'm just going to unsync this and just change it maybe to about 17 Hertz. Pull this mix down. And then let's hear what this sounds like. So that's one way of working with it, but I also like using the instrument as a drum pad. So for example, I've got a 4x4 drum pad, the PreSonus Atom in front of me, and I can use this to trigger the pads. So to show you this, I'm just going to jump back to Group 3 and play it. So that's basically how you can build up your own sampled instrument that uses pitch samples, meaning that the samples have a particular key. And I find the easiest way is just taking these samples and then pulling them into Groove Agent. As you can see, it assigns it to a pad. Just make sure you label everything correctly. So like you saw, I've labeled them here C1 and then C sharp 1, and then I've pulled them into the respective pads over here. And then after that, I've added some extra processing, process up this newly sampled instrument. In this video, I want to show you another way that you can work with samples where you slice up the samples on their transients for the sampler. So let me show you how this is done. First, we're going to start off with a drum loop, and I'll also show you how you can use it with something that is not beat driven. For example, maybe a vocal. So for the drum loop, I'm going to go to Loops and Samples. Then I'm going to scroll down over here to the Soul Assembly. And what I really like are some of the beats in here. So I've already scrolled through and there's a beat that I want to go for. So it is the West Coast Drum Loop 06. So if I just scroll down to the bottom over here, I've got this West Coast Drum Loop 26 over here. And it's at 85 BPM, but it's going to match the tempo that I've got set up here. And it sounds like this. So first, for a reference, I'm just going to add the drum loop over here. Then I'm going to right click it and create a sampler track. So here is the sampler track. For example, if I just hold down C3, it's playing that sample. So this is playing it at the 85 BPM. Now that doesn't really matter because I'm going to use the slice feature over here to slice up the sample. So to do this, I just need to enable it. And as you can see, it detects any transients because of the transient mode. Now I can use the threshold here to determine how many transients it finds. So let's maybe just narrow this down to a little bit less like this. And I'm just going to play on my keyboard. So as you see, it's playing each segment that it detects. Now I'm just going to narrow that down just to a bit more. And you get those very short samples. So obviously that's a bit too much. Now I just want to narrow it down over here to maybe about -8.2. And I want to find some hits that I want to use. So those are the same hits. And then I want to add in a slight fade in and a slight fade out. So it smooths out the hits between each. So let's just record that idea. I'm just going to go over here and we're going to record it. Okay, so that's it. I just want to make sure that I go in and I quantize it. So there we've built up a new drum from a drum loop using the splice features. That could go, for example, in here and do some other things. For example, what I quite like is actually going to transient grid and using that. It's a bit of a different method. Now, what I like about this is it's going to play through the sample and it's going to match up to the grid. So that's quite nice. And what you can also do is you can use this fine-tune course and octave just to speed things up. So maybe if I speed it up an octave and play it. And you could even adjust things like using the LFO. So if I jump this down an octave, increase this LFO, it's going to use the pitch modification over here and this envelope to adjust it. So if I go out of this and play back, you can really get some crazy results by using the pitch modification and the LFO. So that's taking a drum loop and converting it to a sampler engine that you can play back using your MIDI keyboard controller. Now, let's take it a bit further and use something that's not beat orientated. For example, I want to find a vocal, pull this in and see what it sounds like. So what I'm going to do is find the sample that I want to work with first. So jumping back to the loops and samples, if I scroll up to Bloom, there's some great vocals in here. So I'm just going to refresh this. I want to go to lead vocals, and the vocal that I want to go for is vocals 120. It's in C minor and it's in the end harmony 03.
Are we here alone again?
So as you can hear, that's a line that's playing out. I'm going to drag it over here. So that's my reference. But I'm also going to right click on it and say create sampler track. Now I've got a long end here that I don't need. So I'm just going to take the start end and just pull it over here. Then I want to go to the slice section and slice it up. And I can adjust the threshold. But as you can see, it's detected the transients that it needs. So now if I'm playing,
Are we here? Are we here? Are we here? Are we here?
I really like this where you can actually generate a melody using a vocal, but you're not actually using the lyrics as an idea. You're just using the sort of phrasing and the harmony. I could also, for example, add in some fade in, fade outs just to smooth things out.
Are we here? Are we here?
Okay, here we go.
Are we here? Are we here? Are we?
And if I wanted to, I could add some effects to really just help blend things together and make it sit better. So going to delays using eighth notes delays. So that's one way, but what I want to show you now is how to use a vocal sample and use this reverse functionality. So just to show you this in action, I'm going to create another sampler track. What I'm going to do is just take the endpoint and add it near the beginning. Then I'm going to reverse it. So as you can see, it's now going to be played in reverse. If I play back C3, sounds good. Now going to slice, enabling that. Now I found that sort of the graphic display with this, when you reverse it, it gets a bit lost, but don't worry, we can still hear what's going on. So let's go through and add some extra effects as well. Again, go for the ping pong delay. Set it up as eighth notes. Add the spatial and change that filter. And don't forget to add in the fade out, the fade in just to smooth things out. And how about trying some other things? So I want to add some pitch LFO to tweak that. And let's see if that adjusts things and just creates some extra interest. And we could even go into the pitch modulation and change some of the shape, even the frequency, maybe speed it up, and the phasing. So what I'm going to do is use this, but play it over the drum beat that we had over here. So I'm going to create a loop selection, and we're going to be playing that over there just to create something interesting and different and unique. So that sounds a bit crazy, but as you can see, you can definitely get some interesting results using unorthodox samples within something like the sampler, where you splice it up and creates a sort of map, as you may call it, creates a map, if you will, of transients. For example, if I go to this one over here, you can see that this is a vocal part, but it's detected transients in it, and you can trigger these with your MIDI keyboard controller. So just different ways of working with different types of sounds, using the sampler to create something unique in your productions. In this video, I want to show you how you can take a sample and transform it into a short plucked synthetic sound. And for this, we're going to be using the sampler. So first off, let me just go to the media panel over here, down to loops and samples. Again, I'm going to go to the Nightcall synthwave collection, and under analog, I've got the sound over here. So it is synthwave pluck shot A03, and it sounds like this. So nothing impressive. So this A is just letting you know that it's in the key of A. Now that's important. So I first just want to take the sample and just drag it over here, so I've got it as a reference. Then I want to create a sampler track for this. So I'm going to right click on it and say create sampler track. So that creates a sampler track for me, and it assigns it to C3. First off, I want to make sure that I'm in the right pitch. So what I'm going to do is, under the insert section here, I'm just going to add an instance of the Studio EQ. Now, what I like about this is that it has this spectrum analyzer here. And if I play C3, and I just hover over that note there, you can see that it's actually A3. So what I'm going to do is just take this over here and change the assignment to A3. So what that means now is if I play A3, it's playing the correct sample. And if I go down to C, playing it in C. So what I want to do is shorten the start and end times of this. So over here, you've got your start time. So I can drag this anywhere, and as I play it, it's just changing where that start point is. So let's move it somewhere over here and change the sample endpoint. Now obviously that's a bit too short. So what I can do is create a short section like that, and then drag over to the fade length and adjust that. So I've got a very short sound. I can tweak these parameters to get where I want to get with it. So that's what I'm going for. A very, very short sound from the sample. So to modify the sound, I want to start adding some effects ready just to beef it up. So after this EQ over here, I'm going to add an instance of a ping pong delay. I'm going to use some eighth note delays and change this filter and the amount that is being mixed in. And let's create the stereo width. I'm just going to increase the spatial parameter over here. Then after this, I want to add some reverb just to give a more fuller sound to this very short sample. And for this, I'm going to be using the Roomworks reverb. I want a shorter reverb time, maybe about 0.3 seconds. And just adjust this mix. And after this, I just want to add an EQ to shape the tonal quality of the sound. So I want to cut out all the highs. Do a slight little boost over here. And just cut out a bit of the high frequencies. So if we just go back, I'm just going to close this over here and just zoom in. This was the original sound. And I've changed it to this now. And what I can do now is record a melody that's going to be using the short plucked synth sound. So there you go. That's how you can build up your own short plucked synth sound by adding in a sample, changing the sample start and end points, and then after that you can add some effects to process the sound to shape and color it. So in the last video, you saw how you could take an audio sample and convert it to a short plucked synth sound. Now in this video, I want to show you how you can take an audio sample and convert it to a nice long sustained synth sound. So for this, let's first check out the sample that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go back to my loops and samples. Over here, I'm going to the night call again. And the sample that I want to use is this one over here, synth wave, synth shot, C#03. And it sounds like this. So as you can hear, it's a short sample, it decays over there, but it's got nice rich harmonics that can work really well when you want to build up a sound. So first off, I want to take this and drag it onto a track that's going to be our reference for later. Then I'm going to right click over here and create a sample track. So now this is the new sample. So if I play a note, I'm going to play C. This is C2. As I play, I'm holding the note, but as you can hear, that note ends over here and decays out. But that's not what we want. But before doing that, what I want to show you is we just load up an instance of the Studio EQ. I want to use its frequency spectrum analyzer. So I'm going to open that up. I'm playing C2. But you can see that if I hover over here, it's actually playing C#, and you actually can get an indication over here in the file name. So we need to adjust that. So I'm going to take this note over here. It's going to be mapped to C#, which means now if I play a note and I open it up, I'm going to play C again. That root note there is playing on C. So that's working perfectly. So now let's see how we can create a loop of the sound so that it creates a continuous loop that gives us that sort of long sustained pad sound. And for that, I need to go to the loop modes, and here are a selection that we can use. And what's going to work really well is alternate. And what that means is it's going to loop between the loop starts and end points and go back and forth between it. And as you select a loop mode, you get these loop locators here. So I can take this and change where the start of the loop is, and then go to the loop end. And as I drag this in, you start seeing how it drags in this waveform here that we're going to be using as our loop selection. So now when I play a note, it's looping between each here. But as you can hear, it gets these clicks as you hit each point. So what I can do is create a slight bit of a fade here so it smooths it out. And if I wanted to, I could change where these points are for the loop selection, maybe something like this. I'll make it a bit longer. Now I find if I make it too long, it starts introducing too much of the original sound in. We can hear some changes, and I want it to sound a bit smoother. So that's why I find a shorter loop selection works really well. Yeah, that works nicely. Now, when I play a note and change from one note to the next, it's quite drastic. And what I think works really well is to go into the pitch section over here and add a slight bit of glide. If I add too much, it goes a bit crazy. Maybe after that effect, but I find a slight bit of glide works really well. Yeah, that's working nicely. Now, the next thing that I want to do is go over to the filter. I want to use a tube type filter. But for the shape, I'm going to go for a bandpass. So if I play a chord, I'm not going to hear anything now, but as I pull down this cutoff, I can start hearing that sound. And I want to use a bandpass filter because I want to get this nice, smooth sounding synth sound. Add a bit of resonance, maybe a bit of drive as well. Yeah, I think that's sounding great. Now, another thing that I want to do is if I play a note and release the note, it decays quite suddenly. So I want to go into the amp section here to the envelope and increase the release. So as I increase that release, I'm going to play, let go, I get that nice release time. I could even increase the sustain if I wanted to. But I like having that longer release so that it gives that nice sort of tail off effect with sound when you release the notes. Okay, now one last thing that I want to do is just add a ping pong delay at the end of the insert chain over here, just to bounce the sound around the stereo field. So we're going to go into our ping pong delay and change that to eighth notes and just change this filtering section on where the repeats are happening. Increase that mix. And maybe just more on the spatial elements. So I think it just smooths the sound a little bit more with that bouncing of the repeats around the stereo field. Okay, so that is the sound. Now let's record a little bit of a chord progression that's going to play through with the sound. So I'm going to play it over here, and then we're going to compare the original sample to what we've got now. Yeah, it sounded great. Listening back, I just want to do a slight change to the filter. So I'm going to play back and make these changes. So as you saw, I did some changes to the filtering section over there, plus to the amp release time. Now let's jump back. I want to first show you the sample that we started off with. So that very short sound that's quite rich in harmonics, through to this long sustain pad now. So as you can hear, it's very interesting how you can pull an audio sample into the sample track over here, choose where you want things to sort of loop. So I've got these loop sections over here, then use some of these envelope modifications over here to modify the sound. And as you saw, we used the filter and extended the release to give us this nice long sustain pad sound. Now in the next video, let's see how we can take something a bit more different, like maybe a vocal sample, and convert it to a synth sound. So in the last video, you saw how you could take an audio sample and convert it to a sustained synth pad sound. Now in this video, let's follow those same steps, but see how we can take a vocal sample and convert it to a synth sound. So for this example, I'm using the Bloom library within the loops and samples, and I want to go over to the ad-libs, and I'm going for this ad-lib over here, vocals 108 G sharp ad-libs 03 AKB. So if I just play this back, that's what it sounds like. I'm just going to drag it in here to reference later. And then I'm also going to follow the same steps like you saw here. So I'm going to convert this to a sampler track.
And this is mapping it to G sharp 3 because it's already detecting the pitch from the file name. So if I play a G sharp,
it's playing that sample. But as you saw, it is a very short sample, and we're going to convert this into a sustained patch that sounds like a synth. So for the loop mode, we're going to go to alternate again. I'm going to drag these loop markers in. So this is the loop start, and then this is the loop end. We just drag it to around about here, and then do a slight crossfade. If we try a bit of a longer length, let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's pretty nice. So let's use the longer length. As well, we're going to go into the amp envelope and extend that release time out so it is much longer. Now let go. It tails off like that. Now let's go do some other modifications to the sound. For the pitch, I definitely want some glide on that. So I'm going to play a note and then glide into the next. And try a chord. Very nice. Now let's move over on to the filter. I'm going to enable that. For this, I want to use a tube type filter with a low pass 24. So I'm going to play a chord and just adjust this cutoff. Add some resonance and quite a bit of drive. As you can see, it's changing the waveform as I do that, just giving a bit more level. Now let's go for some of the insert effects that we can add in here. I want to go for a more analog style reverb, and what works really well is the Revelation reverb. So I'm just going to go for Revelation. It's going to load up this reverb over here. Let's just pull it up. I've got a hall that's going over here. I've made sure that the output is set to 100% because I want quite a mixed in reverb. I love the sound of this reverb. It really sounds great. I could pull down this mix a bit and hear what it sounds like with it out, and then bring it in. Just gives a very nice tonal quality to the sound. And then finally, after this, let's add in a ping pong delay. For this, we're going to be going for an 8th note ping pong, and then just change those filters where we want them. And add quite a bit of spatial. Yeah, that's sounding great. So let's just record in a bit of a piece and you'll hear what it sounds like. And just going back retrospectively, this is what the sample that we pulled in sounded like before. So a vocal sample completely transformed into a sustained synth that we can use to play out some sort of ambient textures. And we took advantage of the envelopes on the sampler to really modify the sound and using some insert effects.
Hey everyone, welcome to this video series on getting creative with samples and sampling in Cubase. So we're going to see how we can take our samples and add them into the dedicated sampling instruments within Cubase and see how we can customize these and create our own unique instruments that we can use in our productions. So the 3 instruments that we're going to be taking a look at are Groove Agent, the drum machine, and the sampler control. So by using these different sample-based instruments, we can really get creative and build up some interesting instruments that we can use. So starting off, let's take a look at how we can create our own custom drum kits in Groove Agent.
So in this video, I want to show you how you can create your own custom drum kits from samples. So for example, let's say you're going for a drum kit, you go to your VST instruments, and I'm going to load up an instance of Groove Agent. So I'll scroll down over here till I get my Groove Agent SC instrument. I'm going to drag that on and then open up the editor. So instead of just browsing for presets, so let's say, for example, I go to the Rock Pop Toolbox, Alternative Rock, and just choose Brighton as a kit. So that loads up a drum kit for me, and I've got dedicated samples over here. So instead of loading up these stock presets that are within Cubase, how about building your own custom drum kit using your own samples? So to demonstrate this video, I'm going to first remove this instrument. And I'm going to work with samples that are included with Studio One within the loops and samples folder. So for example, if I go back to my home screen, there's these loops and samples. And from here are different sets or collections of samples that I can use to build up my own drum kit. Now you may have folders on your own machine that you might want to use those, but you can just follow along with the same steps to see what I'm doing over here. So first off, I'm going to create an instrument track. It's going to be an instance of Groove Agent. And I'm going to open up the editor so you can see it over here. Now I want to browse for some samples. First off, let's go for some kick samples. And I really like some of these kicks in this AM signature series. So I'm going to click over here. I'm just going to reset the tributes. So I can go for kick drum and I can scroll through here and listen to some of the kicks that I want to use. For example, I like these VK1s and I can just click on it and it's going to preview it over here. It's quite a soft one. I like the 4th one of there. So I'm going to take this and drag it to C1. So now I've got an instance of that drum on my samples over here. So if I trigger C1 on my MIDI controller, it's triggering that drum. That's quite a long end there. So what I could do is just zoom out a bit and pull that in so that end is not so long over there. Now, what if I want to have some varying velocities and different velocities trigger different samples? What I can do then is just take, for example, this kick over here that's a bit softer. And if I drag it onto the top over here, it's going to create 2 velocity layers. So if I hit softly, it's going to trigger different kits. So for example, if I pull this all the way over here, it's only triggering the soft one, but where if I trigger it over here, I'm triggering more of the harder velocity, and I can play it soft and get that kick. So I'm going to do the same thing there, just change the starts and endpoints, and now I've got my kick. So now let's look for a snare, and I'm going to load this onto D1, so following the GM mapping standard of drum kits. So I'm going to stay in the same folder. I'm going to click on snares. Here are my snare drums. As you can see from the naming here are some 8-bit ones. But what I'm looking for is the PK snares. So over here, but in particular, this fourth set. So I'm just going to scroll down till we get the fourth set over here. And this is what I'm looking for. These are ghost notes. But I want the actual hits. Ooh, I like that one. So I'll take that and drag it onto D1. So now I've got my kicks on C1 with differing velocities, and then my snare on D1. Now how about adding some open and closed hats? But before doing that, let me just shorten that for the snare. And I want the hats to go on, the closed hats on F#1 and the open hats on G#1. And for this, I'm going to use another sample set. So I'm going to go back over here to my home screen, into the loops and samples, and I want to use the acoustic drums. And over here, I want to reset the tributes, and I want to look for hi-hats. So what I really like is the closed hi-hats BK 42 110. Yeah, that sounds good. And like I said, that's going to F#1. I'll take that, drag it over here. And if I wanted to, I could actually change the tuning using this fine dial over here to either pitch it down or pitch it up. Then I want to have my open snares on G#1, and these are also in the acoustic drums, but I want to use an open hat. So open hat tip MK46070. I'm going to drag that over here, and what I've got is the closed hats and then the open ones. But as I start playing this, it's still playing out the sample here. So what we can do is set each one to a exclusive group, which is the same as setting a choke sample. So I'm just going to set it for F#1, the same for G#1. So if I hit G#1, you see how that's choking it. So now what we got is this. Okay, so that is a custom drum kit. Now what I could also do is click over here to change the color. I can right click on it and then maybe set the color to red. Doing this makes it really stand out a bit more which pads are being used. For example, let's say the snare, I want to be a sort of orangey yellow color, and the hats, let's set these as green, so color 7. As you can see, I've mainly been using some acoustic drum kits. Now, how about adding in some percussion that's from another patch? So I'm going to go over here to the home screen, loops and samples, then down to Nightcall. And over here, I'm going to reset the tributes and then go to percussion. And what I really like are some of these percussions here in this synthwave patch over here. Yeah, I like that little high-pitched one. And this I'm going to be sending to A#1. Now, one more thing I want to show you is if I just select these samples over here and take them, I can either hold on the top or I can hold down here, and it's going to populate those samples into all these pads over here. So now I've got a selection of percussion samples that I can use. I can actually just select them, right click on them, set the color and make them, let's say, a purpley color. So now I've made all those samples purple. The greens are the hats, the orangey yellow is the snare, and then the red is the kick. Now I like these drums, and I want to make them sound even bigger by adding in some Roomworks reverb. So I'm going to load up an instance of Roomworks, increase that reverb time, and then reduce the mix. Yeah, that's nice, just giving a bit more of a lively feel to the drums. But another thing you could do is if you want to add some extra processing, you can right click on each drum. For example, let's say I want to send the snare to a different output. I can click on here and then say assign output and send it to another output. I'm going to send it to output 2. And that means if I jump across to my mixer, I'll just go to the lower pane over here. I'm going to play my drums. And as I hit my snare, I've got my own dedicated snare. And the beauty of this is that I can go in and start adding extra processing for just that sample hit. And once you've finished with everything that you've set up, all the samples that you've added in, and the way that you've set up each pad, you can go into that instrument and save it as your own preset now. So I'm going to click over here and say Save Presets. I'm going to call it Gary Groove Agent Custom. And say OK. So now I've saved my own preset, which means in future songs and projects, I can load up an instance of Groove Agent. And then from there, I can recall my saved preset. So that's how to build up your own custom drum kit within Groove Agent. Now in the next video, let's see how we can create our own custom instruments using the drum machine. Now in the last video, you saw how you could use the Groove Agent to build up your own customized drum kit by using your own samples. Now in this video, I want to show you how you can do the same thing, but now with the new drum machine. Also, what you can do with the drum machine is add layers of samples and even add synthetic elements as an extra layer to your samples. So let me show you how this is done. So first off, I'm going to go to Project, Add Track, and we're going to add in a drum machine. So I'll just give this a name. Let's just call it Drum Machine. And I'm going to use a pattern event for this. So I'm going to click on Add Track. Now I want to add a kick, but I want to add in my own sample. And for this, I'm going to go to the Browse panel, go to the Media, to the Loops and Samples. And for this, I want to navigate down to Nightcall, which has a selection of synthwave type of sounds. And what I think will work quite well is if I just refresh this, go down to the kick drums, and just take a listen to some of these samples. Yeah, I really like that. So I'm going to take this and drag it on to my layer over here on C1. So I've got this kick. Yeah, that sounds quite nice. I could add a touch of reverb if I wanted to, just to give it a bit more body. Maybe that's a bit much, just pull this back. And I said you could add synthetic elements. So over here, instead of adding a sample, I'm going to add one of the virtual kicks. So I'm going to go over here and add kick 1. So now I've got a synthetic kick with a sampled kick. And just adjust these levels. So combining your own sample with a synthetic element. Now let's go over to the snares. For this, I'm again going to go for a sample, and I'm going to refresh this and look at the snares. Now I already know which snare sound I want to go for, so I'm just going to jump for this. So this is number 19 over here. Yeah, I really like that. So I'm going to take this and drag it over here. Maybe what I want to do is just tune this up. So we've got a slight bit of a different sound to that snare. As well, I want to add in some filtering. So for this, I'm going to go for Rate Red. That adds in some sort of bit crushing to the sound. Add in some distortion. And maybe just change this envelope amount. As well, I can add in some reverb. And like you saw with the kick drum, I'm going to add in a synthetic element. Now this time, instead of a snare, I'm actually going to go for percussion and add in some noise. So that's a nice extra layer that you can add on top. Just drop the level. Maybe add in a bit of distortion. And just turn the level down. So now we've got some synthetic elements added with some samples. Now let's go for some hi-hats, and these I'm going to assign to F#1 and A#1 respectively. So going for F#1, let's go for a closed hi-hat. This time we're going to go back to the synthwave selection, reset that, go for hats, and I already know a sample that I'm going to go for, which is the closed hats, and it is 04. So if I just scroll all the way down over here, that's the hat that I want to add in. I'll drag that in. What I do want to do is tune this up. So you've got that higher pitch over there, add in some delay and some reverb. Now going over to the closed hats, I'll jump over here. Again, I want to add in a synthwave sample. This is going to be the open hats and 02. Drag that in, just change the tuning. Yeah, that's sounding good. And maybe just add in some delay and some reverb as well. And what we want to do is add this to an exclusive group so that the one chokes the other. So I've got a group and it's these two samples over here, the hi-hats and the closed hi-hats. And respectively, I'm going to set this to group 1 and group 1 over here. So if you've got the hi-hats open and close, so that's going to choke the hats if you're playing the one pattern to the other. So now let's build up a pattern, and I'll show you as well as how you can add some other effects to these samples to really transform them. So over here, I'm just going to double click to create a pattern, then click over here to open that pattern. I want the kick over here. I want the snare over here. I want open hats going the whole way, except for an open hats over here. Then I want to go to the velocities over here and just slightly tweak them so it feels like you got more of a human feel with these hi-hats. So that's how you can create your own customized drum instrument using the drum machine. We add in your layers, plus you can add in some synthetic elements. Now, what I haven't shown you is the pad effects. So you can go even into each pad, for example, going into the snare here, go to pad effects. And as you can see, you can enable bit crushing, distortion, filtering, or equalization. So let's say I go into bit crushing. Mix this in. Maybe go over to the kick. Also add in a slight bit of bit crushing. Go to the equalizer, do a bit of the boost and the low mids. Go to the snare, maybe do some equalization as well, jump over there. So you can see you've got a lot of control by using these extra effects to tailor out the sound that you want to use for your customized drums. So that's how you can use this drum machine to build up your own customized drums. As you saw, you could load up your own samples, plus combine some other elements that are built within this instrument to really take your samples to the next level. So now let's get into found sounds. Now, found sounds are objects that you find around your household or around you, and you're hitting them to create a percussive sound from them, and you're tracking and recording them. And then from that, you can use those unique found sounds to build up your own unique instrument. So I've got 3 different objects that I've collected that I want to record. One of them is a wooden box that I'm hitting with a wooden object. The next is a ceramic plate that I'm hitting with a metal tool. And then finally, I've got a steel fan that I want to scrape across with a metal tool to create a unique sound. So let's track these sounds. I'm going to record them, and I'm going to record 3 different velocity levels. So a soft, a medium, and a hard. And then after that, I'm going to edit them down. So I've got 3 different velocity layers of each sound that I can pull into Groove Agent. So let's start off with the wooden box. So I'm going to go over here, make sure that I've recorded on the track and turning on the monitoring, and let's record this box. Okay, so there is the different layers for the wooden box. I've got the sort of softer hits, the medium hits, and then I did a bit of a loud one over here. So these are a bit loud, so I'm going to use these two over here. So I'm going to go in and edit them so that I've got a sample for each hit. Now let's move over onto the ceramic plate. Okay, so that's the ceramic plate. Now finally, let's move over onto the steel fan. Okay, so that's my 3 different sounds that I've recorded. A wooden box being hit by a wooden tool, a ceramic plate being hit by a metal tool, and then a steel fan being scraped by a metal tool. And as you can see, I've got different hits, and I want to go in and edit these and cut them down so I've got a velocity layer for each one. Now, what you want to do is you want to zoom up basically right onto your audio. Let's just make the wave shape very big. And we want to get right in on that first transient. So we're going to take off snapping, zoom in very, very close, basically go all the way in there. So we got right onto that first transient. I can go right in, and then I'm going to cut when I don't have anything left. So I'm going to go to my scissors tool, cut over here, and then basically that is going to be my sample. And I'm going to go through all these other samples as well and just cut out what I need. So I've got 3 different samples of each one. So let me just go ahead and do all of that, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how we can take these, pull them into Groove Agent, and create our own found object instrument. Okay, so I've gone in and I've edited down the samples. As you can see, I've got 3 different samples per each track. So that's the soft, medium, loud. And I've gone in and gone straight to the transient. So if I just zoom up all the way over here, for example, on this part, I just want to get right into the start there. If I just drag this up here, you can see that here is where the start of the transient is, right over there.
And what I can also do is add in a small fade in at the beginning.
So I'm going to do that to my samples just to make a nice clean start for the beginning. And if I wanted to, I could also go in
and add a fade out
on the end of the sample. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of a tail on this, but I can go in here and add a slight fade out. So let me just play back so you can hear all these samples now. So over here are the 3 different woodbox samples. So you can hear it goes from soft to louder, the ceramic plate. And then finally over here, the scrapes on the steel fan. Okay, so those are the samples or the found sound objects I'm going to use. Now in the next video, I'm going to show you how we can build up a Groove Agent instrument using these as one-shot samples. So in the last video, you saw how we collected these found sounds. Now in this video, let me show you how we can take these found sounds and build up our own custom unique instrument. So first off, I want to create an instrument track. So I'll go to Add Track, Add Instrument. I want this to be an instance of Groove Agent. That is the sample engine that I'm going to be using. And I'm just going to call this Found Instrument. So I'll click OK and add that instrument. Bring this up. Now I want to start populating these cells with the samples. So first starting off with the wooden block, I'm going to take this sample and just drag it here to C1. So that adds it. Now I'm going to take the others. So take this, make sure that I'm selecting the top one there. You can see it creates the 2 velocity layers, and likewise the same for this. So now when I'm hitting on my keyboard, if I hit soft and then hit harder, it's triggering the different samples, as you can see.
Now let's do the same for the ceramic hits.
I'll take this and this I'm going to add to D1.
Again to D1.
And this last one. And then lastly, I want to add the steel fan sounds over here to E1. So I'll take this sample, add it on, this one as well, and then the last one. So now we've got the 3 different samples. Now I want to do some pitching changes to some of these samples. So for example, the ceramics, I want to take this and just shift it slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the pitch tab over here and shift it down 3 semitones. Yeah, that's sounding good. Now this is just the basic setup with the raw samples. I want to take it a step further by taking these pads and send them to their own unique outputs and then adding extra processing to really transform this kit. So I want to take this wood box, right click on it, go to assignment and go to output 2. For the ceramic, I'm going to go to output 3. And then for the steel fan, I'm going to send to output 4. That means now if I jump across to my mixer, I've now got these outputs over here. If I play my instruments, you can see I've got separate outputs for these. But let's just take these levels. I'm just going to select these, make sure that I've got Q-Link enabled, and just drop them all so we've got some headroom. Then I want to take these ceramic sounds and shift this to the left, and then the steel fan to the right. Now let's start off with the processing of the wooden block. So with this, I want to add some processing that's going to make it sound a bit fuller in the low end, make it sound more like a kick drum. So I'm going to go for some drastic EQing over here. So starting off, let's go for the Studio EQ. And I want to do quite a heavy bass boost. So there we go, we're hearing a lot more of the bass. And this frequency, just want to get rid of that a bit. So getting rid of the sort of low mids. And then shelving off some of the high frequencies. So quite a change from the beginning, which is this. And then that's the frequencies. To further enhance this, I want to add another EQ chained after this. And this is going to be in the form of the EQ P1A. So this is an EQ that emulates a Pultec style EQ. And how it works is you do boosts at a frequency and at the same time you do some attenuations. So I just want a bit more low end coming there. I just want to add a bit more snap at about 5K. And just attenuate that a bit. Yeah. Then after this, I want to add some compression in the form of the black valve, giving some emulation of that valve compressor. So I'll go for the black valve, dial in some peak reduction. So it's just going to even out some of the peaks that we're getting from the dynamics of these samples. Also drive it a bit, add some gain, and then just compare before. So this is nothing. You can see we've got quite a bit of dynamics, and then dialing this in just to even out the dynamics. So just reset those and just pull down this output slightly because you are getting some clipping happening. So obviously driving up a bit in the beginning, but that's fine. We're just sort of saturating that with the compression a bit. Now moving over onto the ceramic sound. I want to drown this in some reverb, and what I really like is the Revelation reverb, which adds a nice vintage quality sound to it. Very nice. Now I just want to mix this in. I don't want that whole amount, so I just dial it back here and then increase some. Yeah, I really like even just this default patch here, just dialing a bit in really gives some character to the sound. And then just checking the level against the wooden box kick sound. Rise that a bit. Now let's move over onto the processing on the steel fan. Now I want to do quite a bit of processing on here. Starting off, I want to go for some ping pong delay just to bounce the sound around the left and right speakers. For this, I'm going to use an 1/8 note delay. I don't need that much, so I'm just going to pull back on the mix, make it a bit more spatial, and then just change these filters. That's working there very nicely for that delay. After this, I want to shape the sound with some EQ. So I'm going to go for the Studio EQ. Shove off some of those low frequencies, actually quite a bit. So I want to cut off a lot of the lows and mids and just let the highs come through. Then after this, I want to degrade the sound by using some bit crushing. So I'll go for the bit crusher effect in Cubase. What works well is if you take the sample divider and start increasing it up. Increase the depth. So it's like softening the sort of higher frequencies and just degrading the sound a bit, which makes it sit quite nicely with these other effects. Then I want to add in some modulation in the form of some chorus. Dial in a sync rate of about 16ths. Increase the width. And the mix, just dial that back maybe a bit. And just change the filters. So we actually really want to manipulate the sound to make it sound like something completely different. So after this, I want to add the Roomworks reverb. Drowning it in some reverb. Maybe just pulling back on the mix. And then lastly, I think some flange will work really well last on the chain. Obviously, you don't need such a drastic setting. I want to turn the sync off and turn it to about 20 Hertz. and just mix this in. So this is with no flanger, and then adding some in. Just adding some movement. So now we've got this for the 3 different sounds. I think this level can actually come down a bit. So what we can do now is actually just record in a part, maybe a sort of a drum loop with this new fully customized instrument. So just a simple bit, it's creating quite a nice ambient piece, but you still get that sort of percussive feel from it. And it definitely sounds very unique coming from these found sounds. So one thing I just want to go in and just quantize everything there so that it's nice and neat on the grid. And if we just backtrack and take a listen to the original samples, I'm just going to go back over here. This is the wooden box, the ceramic, then the steel fan, and then now the drum sound that we came up with the new found instrument sounds. So you can have a lot of fun with this. Go take a look around, see what objects you can find, record them, edit them in Cubase, and then pull them into the Groove agent instrument and start processing it with different effects to see how far you can take it.